Welcome to Washington Today on C-SPAN Radio for Tuesday, March 11, 2024. House passes an extension of federal government funding to prevent a shutdown at the end of the week. It was near party line, 217 to 213, sending it to the Senate. President Donald Trump initially announces a doubling of tariffs on steel and aluminum from Canada, latest escalation in the trade war. And then Ontario Premier Doug Ford says his previously announced 25% tariff on electricity to the U.S. will be suspended while further trade negotiations continue. And then President Trump pulls back his new tariff. Wall Street has been down the past few days over concerns over tariff policy. Today, the Dow dropping 478. White House reacting to Elon Musk's comments about Social Security and other entitlements being the big ones to find savings, saying Mr. Musk was referring only to fraud in those programs. Secretary of State Marco Rubio meets with Ukrainian officials in Saudi Arabia, announcing Ukraine has agreed to a 30-day ceasefire with Russia and, quote, the ball's in Russia's court. Secretary Rubio also saying the U.S. will resume military intelligence sharing with Ukraine. And the National Transportation Safety Board releases a preliminary report on the deadly helicopter and plane collision in January near Ronald Reagan Washington National Airport, calling for a permanent change to the helicopter routes around the airport after finding a high risk of another collision. And the House today voting 217 to 213 to pass the bill that will prevent a government shutdown at the end of the week and fund the federal government through the rest of the fiscal year, which goes through September 30th. Vote was near party line, one Republican voting no, Thomas Massie of Kentucky, one Democrat voting yes, Jared Golden of Maine. Congressional Quarterly writes the Republican bill generally provides continued funding for operations of the federal government through the remainder of fiscal year 2025, funding most programs and activities at FY 2024 levels, but reducing funding for certain domestic and foreign aid programs while increasing funding for defense. According to Republican aides, non-defense funding is reduced by some $13 billion, primarily by dropping earmarked funding, while defense is increased by $6 billion for an overall net reduction of $7 billion in discretionary spending. That was from Congressional Quarterly. Here's some of the House floor debate before the vote. Tom Cole, Republican of Oklahoma, chairs the Appropriations Committee.
Sadly, despite our best efforts, we were unable to come to a final agreement on the full-year appropriations bills. Although we were very close on a final dollar figure, my colleagues in the minority made additional demands that would restrict the legitimate authority of the executive in the appropriations process. These are restrictions that the minority would never accept for a Democratic president, nor are they provisions that President Trump would or should sign into law. It is deeply unfortunate and disappointing that the minority chose to make these unreasonable demands. Republicans never left the negotiating table and indeed worked diligently with Democrats to reach a bicameral, bipartisan deal. Sadly, the minority allowed their opposition to the president to cloud their judgment, giving in to a political temper tantrum rather than voting to keep the government open. That truly is the choice before us, Mr. Speaker. Today's bill is a simple, straightforward, continuing resolution, funding the government and keeping it open through September 30th. It maintains the status quo, providing flat funding for the government and including only legitimate anomalies. Importantly, this bill does not contain a single poison pill policy rider. It's a clean CR, fully funding our government. This includes our military and defense needs, and indeed we've accomplished this while also fully funding the Department of Defense, including the largest pay raise for junior enlisted personnel in over 40 years. We're also maintaining funding for other critical functions of government, including border defense, roads, parks, childcare, water infrastructure projects, biomedical research, job training, and countless others. I know members have heard some fear-mongering about Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid. This bill makes no changes to any of these programs, leaving them intact as is, and with the funding they need to operate through the end of the fiscal year. Let me say that again. There are no changes to Social Security, Medicare, and Medicaid, period. Mr. Speaker, the outcome of the fiscal year 2025 appropriations process is not what I wanted. But at the end of the day, it is significantly better than the alternative, a government shutdown.
Congressman Tom Cole, Republican of Oklahoma, chair of the Appropriations Committee, before the House voted to pass that bill. and send it to the Senate. Again, from the Congressional Quarterly Description, the 99-page bill does not codify the spending cuts identified by Elon Musk's DOGE initiative that is making spending reductions throughout the federal government. Still, Democrats oppose the bill, saying it would effectively nullify hundreds of spending directives included in fiscal year 2024 appropriations acts and thereby allow the Trump administration to prioritize and shift federal spending as it sees fit, including possibly by denying federal funding to Democratic cities and states. That was from the Congressional Quarterly Description of this bill. Here's more of the House floor debate. Speaking in opposition, Rosa DeLauro of Connecticut, ranking Democrat on the Appropriations Committee.
It is not a simple stopgap that keeps the lights on, the doors open. This is Republican leadership handing over the keys of the government and a blank check to Elon Musk and to President Trump. As the White House has said, this bill creates more flexibility for this administration to continue to undermine the Constitution and the countless spending laws by stealing promised investments from American families, children, and businesses, unlawfully dismantling agencies, arbitrarily firing civil servants, and canceling union contracts. Read the Constitution, Article 1, Section 9, Clause 7. The power of the purse resides with the Congress and not with the executive. And in fact, the president has no legitimate authority from meddling in the appropriations process. Our colleagues across the aisle have gone to their districts. They witnessed rage from their constituents at these actions. They have been advised by their political consultants not to do town halls altogether. Why bother listening to the American people? It was President Lincoln who said, "Public sentiment is everything, and without it you can do nothing." They do not have public sentiment. So now what we should do? The answer should not be cutting non-defense programs by $15 billion and defense by $3 billion as compared to the Fiscal Responsibility Act agreement in 2025. They are in violation of the Fiscal Responsibility Act. There is an agreement with Senator Schumer, Speaker Johnson. We all voted for it here. But this is a violation, cuts non-defense $15 billion and defense by $3 billion. Why do they want to shortchange defense investments by $3 billion? I ask them. Not only is it bad for our military, there is a reason the Department of Defense has never operated for an entire year under a continuing resolution. And above all, it transfers more power to the administration to shut off and repurpose funding as they see fit. The will of the Congress and the people ignored. Elon Musk and President Trump would be able to fire thousands of employees. Yes, we do not oversee Social Security. That's in the purview of the Ways and Means Committee. However, we do have control over the administration of Social Security.
Congresswoman Rosa DeLauro, Democrat of Connecticut, ranking member on the Appropriations Committee, on the House floor before the House voted to approve this bill to prevent the government shutdown and fund the federal government through the rest of the fiscal year end of September. The vote was 217 to 213, almost strictly party line, except one Republican voted no, Thomas Massie of Kentucky, and one Democrat voted yes, Jared Golden of Maine. Politico reporting that Vice President J.D. Vance told House Republicans hours ahead of the expected vote that Republicans will take the blame for a government shutdown if they don't pass the legislation, according to three people who were in the room for the comments. Vance emphasized that Republicans had little room for dissent, given the tight margin in the House. Vance told House Republicans they need to vote for the GOP funding bill to clear the runway for the massive domestic policy bill Republicans are now in the process of assembling. The people added, by failing to pass the stopgap, Vance added, Republicans will lose momentum on securing the border and lose credibility with voters. He also assured Republican members that President Trump would continue cutting federal funding with his Department of Government Efficiency initiative and pursue impoundment, that is, holding back money appropriated by Congress. That was from Politico. All eyes were on the House Freedom Caucus to see whether they would vote for it. They're a group of conservative Republicans. And this morning, the chair, Congressman Andy Harris of Maryland, said the caucus has endorsed the funding measure.
The first question I always get asked is, first of all, what's the chairman of the House Freedom Caucus doing at a press conference about continuing resolutions? Well, I'll tell you, the bottom line is that a continuing resolution is usually the first step to an omnibus bill. That's why traditionally the House Freedom Caucus has opposed continuing resolutions. This clearly is not. This is a continuing resolution that goes to the end of the fiscal year and therefore negates the need for any consideration of any omnibus bill. Second of all, this is the first continuing resolution in my 14 years here that actually reduces the amount of spending from the previous year while funding the military, funding veterans, funding the women, infants, and children programs for HERD, and importantly, funding the deportation of criminal illegal aliens that are threatening our communities. So I'm 100% behind this continuing resolution. This is not your grandfather's continuing resolution. This is a different type of spending bill that I think is the way that we need to do it in order to keep the Trump administration, Elon Musk, and Doge to continue its promise to the American people to fight fraud, waste, and abuse in the federal government and increase its efficiency. Again, 100% support. The Freedom Caucus has issued its support of the yesterday issued its support of the continuing resolution.
Congressman Andy Harris, Republican from Maryland, chair of the Freedom Caucus, at a news conference this morning before the debate and the successful vote to pass the government funding measure. President Trump posted Monday night his thanks to the Freedom Caucus for supporting the CR, but also took aim at Congressman Thomas Massie, Republican of Kentucky, who had announced he would be voting no. Turns out he was the only one voting no. President Trump writing, Congressman Massie of beautiful Kentucky is an automatic no vote on just about everything, despite the fact that he has always voted for continuing resolutions in the past. He should be primaried, and I will lead the charge against him. House Speaker Mike Johnson, Republican of Louisiana, was asked about this at a news conference today.
The president went after one of your own colleagues yesterday, Thomas Massie, who does plan to vote against this. He says he should be primary. Do you agree with the president? Should Thomas Massie be primary for his vote against this?
Look, I'm in the incumbent protection program here. That's what I do. Speaker of the House, and you know me and my style and my, the way I do this job. I don't. I bless those who persecute me, right? So. Thomas and I have had disagreements, but I consider Thomas Massie a friend. He's a thoughtful guy. I guess he'll tell you he's doing what he thinks is right on this. I just vehemently disagree with his position, but I'll leave it at that.
House Speaker Mike Johnson at a news conference. Congressman Tony Gonzalez, Republican of Texas, said on CNN today that he thinks Congressman Massie should be challenged in the next election.
But is it appropriate, you think, for President Trump to threaten a Republican Congressman Thomas Massie with a primary if he votes against the CR? Is that appropriate?
Hell yeah, it's appropriate. This is politics, Wolf. You better have tough skin. You better be ready for everything. There's good days and bad days. There's not one member of Congress up here that hasn't gone through the exact same thing. So that's a choice that Thomas has decided to make. A lot of us make those decisions. And you better believe that President Trump is going to make sure that his voice is heard one way or another, which is perfectly fine. Once again, this is politics.
Congressman Tony Gonzalez, Republican from Texas, interviewed on CNN. And Congressman Massie wrote on X before President Donald Trump's latest post, "Someone thinks they can control my voting card by threatening my reelection. Guess what? Doesn't work on me. 3 times I've had a challenger who tried to be more MAGA than me. None busted 25% because my constituents prefer transparency and principles over blind allegiance." Now that the CR has passed the House, it's over to the Senate. And there it could be filibustered by the Democrats, so some Democratic support will be necessary. Senator Rand Paul, Republican of Kentucky, says he is a no. Writing on X, the bill continues spending at the inflated pandemic levels and will add $2 trillion to the debt this year. The Senate Majority Leader John Thune, Republican of South Dakota, was asked at a news conference about how the Senate will be dealing with this.
You had criticism for the Democrats about how they might potentially block this, but we know of at least one Republican, Senator Paul, who's opposed to this, maybe a couple of others. Do you have the same criticism for Republicans who might be opposed to this, and would you accuse them of filibustering this bill?
You talking about the CR. Well, I think we've, as we've done our head count, I think we feel very comfortable that we will deliver a majority vote for this. The question is, can we get the 60-vote supermajority threshold that's necessary to pass it? And in order to do that, we need Democrats. So we will have our conference on board in support of keeping the government open and finishing off what is last year's business, which is Chuck Schumer, the Democrats in the Senate at the time, not taking a single appropriations bill, putting it on the floor, or moving it forward. This is a pileup from last year. This is FY25. We want to get it in the rearview mirror, and we think the best way to do that, right now at least, based on what the House is going to do today and what the President supports, is to pass this CR. The question is, will the Democrats filibuster it? And we'll find out soon enough.
Senate Majority Leader John Thune at a news conference today. The Senate Democratic leadership also held a news conference in the same place, but at a different time. And the Minority Leader Chuck Schumer of New York had a very quick response to what he plans for the continuing resolution.
What do you say to some Democrats who might go ahead and vote for this because they're concerned that if the government shuts down, that's a bad thing, or gives Elon Musk more enterprise to go through the government?
We're going to wait and see what the House does first.
You're not giving any specifics to those members?
Senator Chuck Schumer with reporters. Again, the House passing the continuing resolution funding the government through September 30th. The vote was 217 to 213, almost completely party line, except one Republican voted no, Thomas Massie of Kentucky, and one Democrat voted yes from Maine, Jared Golden, and it now heads to the Senate. This is Washington Today. From Associated Press, President Donald Trump said Tuesday that he will double his planned tariffs on steel and aluminum from 25% to 50% for Canada, escalating a trade war with the United States' northern neighbor and standing unmoved by recent stock market turmoil and rising recession risks. Trump said on social media that the increase of the tariffs set to take effect on Wednesday is a response to the price increase that the provincial government of Ontario put on electricity sold to the United States. That was from Associated Press. Since that article was written, he did pull that back a bit. We'll have more on that in just a few moments. But here is White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt asked today at her news conference in the White House about tariffs and Wall Street.
How do you sell to the American people then, after they're looking at what's happening in the markets this week, and say that the tariff policy long term is something good?
Well, just think about what the tariff policy long-term will do for our country. I think many of us probably grew up in small towns. I know at least I did, and the main street in my small town looks a heck of a lot worse than it probably did decades ago before I was alive. At least my parents and grandparents tell me so. And I know many Americans feel that same way. What the president envisions for this country is for the United States of America to be a manufacturing superpower, where there are American factories and businesses owned by Americans, producing goods that we are exporting to the rest of the world. Those revenues will stay here. It will increase wages for people here in our great country. It will ensure our national security, and it will boost the morale of the American people to have thriving industries again. Think about Detroit, Michigan. Think about North Carolina, as I mentioned, that used to have a thriving furniture industry that no longer exists because of the globalist trade policies of previous and past administrations. And the American people gave the president a tremendous opportunity to restore American greatness and restore our manufacturing dominance, and he's intent on doing just that.
White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt at a news conference at the White House. On the Senate floor on Capitol Hill, Minority Leader Chuck Schumer came to a different conclusion about the president's tariff policies.
We know the stock market is Donald Trump's favorite measuring stick. But right now, because of him, his actions, his erraticness, his own actions have plunged markets and therefore people's retirement accounts into chaos. Yesterday, the Dow fell by almost 900 points, 2%. The S&P plunged 4%, 2.7%, and the NASDAQ composite, the tech composite, fell by 4%. Why is this happening? One reason, President's tariffs on Canada and Mexico. But the other is pure chaos. No stability, no certainty for businesses, total confusion in the economy. One thing businesses tell us, They want certainty, and they want stability. One thing they're getting from Donald Trump: uncertainty and chaos. And because starting this foolish and chaotic trade war, on again one day, off again the next day, Donald Trump has single-handedly poured a bucket of ice water on the economy. Trump thinks he can just yak, oh, I'm for it, and then the next day I'll say I'm not for it. But businesses can't plan that way. If they think there's a chance he'll come back and do it, they don't plan, they don't buy, they don't go forward. Businesses right now are in a state of total confusion. They have no idea what Trump is going to do next. Is he going to impose tariffs today, tomorrow, next month? How big will they be? What countries? What products? Every day you hear a different answer on something that is so important to the American economy and the world economy. American consumers are also anxious. If you don't know what tomorrow will bring, you're going to spend less today. Donald Trump himself knows that tariffs will hurt working families. When asked on Fox Business about the possibility that his tariffs could trigger a recession, he refused to even downplay the possibility it can happen. This was a rare moment of truth from Donald Trump. He said, yeah, my tariffs may cause a recession. And then he seemed to say, his body language said, who cares? Amazing. The guy who said he'd lift the economy not only is beginning to cause the beginnings of economic downturn, but he seems to be proud of it. Wow. Is that what America bargained for? I don't think so.
Senate Minority Leader Chuck Schumer, Democrat from New York, on the Senate floor. A resolution the House passed today that set up the rules for debate for 3 other bills, including the government funding measure to prevent the shutdown, also contained a provision that prevents the Congress from voting to end President Trump's declaration of a national emergency along the southern border, which the president is using to impose tariffs on Canada and Mexico without having to run them by Congress. Congressman Jim McGovern, Democrat from Connecticut, ranking member on the Rules Committee, pointed this out during debate on that resolution.
Guess what they tucked into this rule, hoping that nobody would notice? They did this after everyone went home. They slipped in a little clause letting them escape from ever having to debate or vote on Trump's tariffs. Isn't that clever? Trump's trade war will result in one of the largest, if not the largest, tax increase on American families ever. And this rule gives him the ability to do it without a vote in Congress.
Congressman Jim McGovern on the House floor before the House did pass that resolution 216 to 214 with that provision. Congressman Gregory Meeks of New York, top Democrat on the Foreign Affairs Committee, had introduced resolutions to terminate the president's national emergency, allowing the imposition of the tariffs on Canada and Mexico without congressional approval. Ontario's Premier Doug Ford was interviewed today on MSNBC about President Trump's initial announcement increasing planned tariffs on steel and aluminum coming from Canada from 25% to 50%.
I start every interview with saying we love Americans. I love Americans, spent 20 years of my life there, and I know Canadians love Americans and vice versa. In saying that, we will not back down. We will be relentless. I apologize to the American people that President Trump decided to have an unprovoked attack on our country, on families, on jobs, and it's unacceptable. Let's work together. Let's get to the table if he has issues, and let's sort this out. You see the market tumbling, consumer confidence is down, and if he continues on with this, assembly plants in Michigan will shut down, and around the country, whoever makes autos, and as well as businesses. They're going to hurt. And these pensions, when the market goes down, it's going to affect people's pensions. So I'm not too sure why he continues to attack his closest friends and allies. But we need the American people to speak up. We need those CEOs to actually get a backbone and stand in front of them and tell them this is going to be a disaster. It's mass chaos right now. That's what we need.
Well, he'll have a chance to hear from those CEOs today, as we just mentioned. If you're talking de-escalation at this point, what would it take for you to remove that surcharge on the electricity coming into the U.S. from Canada?
Well, doubling the tariff on aluminum, that the U.S. only can manufacture 16% aluminum that they need. The balance, for the most part, comes from Quebec, over 65%. It's going to hurt your manufacturing. You need the aluminum. You need our high-grade nickel. And I want to send more high-grade nickel. You need our electricity. You need the 4.3 million barrels of oil that gets shipped down. I want to make sure we build an AMCAN fortress, the two greatest countries in the world. Fighting like this does not make sense. But I will respond appropriately on the electricity. Stay tuned.
Ontario Premier Doug Ford interviewed on MSNBC, and then President Donald Trump posting after that interview, "Why would our country allow another country to supply us with electricity even for a small area? Who made these decisions and why? And how can you imagine Canada stooping so low as to use electricity that so affects the life of innocent people as a bargaining chip and threat? They will pay a financial price for this so big that it will be read about in history books for many years to come." That was the post from President Trump, and there were still more developments later in the day. CNBC writes that Ontario Premier Doug Ford on Tuesday said he was temporarily suspending his province's planned 25% surcharge on electricity exported to the U.S. after U.S. Commerce Secretary Howard Lutnick agreed to renewed trade talks. Ford said that he and Lutnick had a productive conversation about the economic relationship between the U.S. and Canada earlier Tuesday. Ford said, "We have both agreed, let cooler heads prevail." And then a statement from the White House press office after President Trump threatened to use his executive powers to retaliate with a colossal 50% tariff against Canada. Premier Doug Ford spoke with Secretary Lutnick to convey that he is backing down on implementing a 25% charge on electricity exports to the U.S. President Trump has once again used the leverage of the American economy, which is the best and biggest in the world, to deliver a win for the American people. Pursuant to his previous executive orders, a 25% tariff on steel and aluminum with no exceptions or exemptions will go into effect for Canada and all our other trading partners at midnight, March 12th. That statement from the White House press office. Wall Street today, the Dow down 478, NASDAQ down 32, S&P down 42. Washington today continues in a moment.
C-SPAN Now is a free mobile app featuring your unfiltered view of what's happening in Washington, live and on demand. Keep up with the day's biggest events with live streams of floor proceedings and hearings from the U.S. Congress, White House events, the courts, campaigns, and more from the world of politics, all at your fingertips. You can also stay current with the latest episodes of Washington Journal and find scheduling information for C-SPAN's TV networks and C-SPAN Radio, plus a variety of compelling podcasts. C-SPAN Now is available at the Apple Store and Google Play, or visit our website, cspan.org/cspan now. C-SPAN Now, your front row seat to Washington, anytime, anywhere.
Welcome back to Washington Today, available as a podcast on the C-SPAN Now mobile app. It's free and wherever you get your podcasts. Senate today confirmed Deputy Transportation Secretary Steve Bradbury on a near party line vote, 51-46. Senator Rand Paul, Republican of Kentucky, voting no with all Democrats. Monday night, the Senate confirmed Lori Chavez-DeRemer for Labor Secretary, a vote of 67-32. 3 Republicans voted no. Ted Budd, Mitch McConnell, and Rand Paul. 17 Democrats voted yes. That was the last cabinet secretary in the Trump administration to be confirmed. There's one more cabinet-level position that's pending, and that's Elise Stefanik, currently a Republican congresswoman from New York, nominated for U.S. ambassador to the UN. The White House put out what it calls a fact check that reads, the Trump administration will not cut Social Security, Medicare, or Medicaid benefits. President Donald Trump himself has said it over and over and over again. Elon Musk didn't say that either. The press is lying. Statement points to Elon Musk, the head of the Department of Government Efficiency, saying that waste and fraud in entitlement spending is what will be cut. And then it lists some examples of that, what they call waste and fraud. Here's what Elon Musk said in a Fox Business interview on Monday.
The waste and fraud in entitlement spending, which is most of the federal spending is entitlements. That's like the big one to eliminate, because that's the sort of $500 billion, maybe $700 billion a year.
Elon Musk in the Fox Business interview on Monday. This came up at today's White House briefing with Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt.
I wanted to ask ask about some comments Elon Musk made yesterday. He said that there is $500 to $700 billion in waste and fraud and entitlement spending. He called it, quote, the big one to eliminate. Earlier this month, he also referred to Social Security as a Ponzi scheme. Should Americans expect changes, big changes, to Social Security and Medicare?
President Trump has been unequivocally clear on this. He is going to protect Social Security and Medicare benefits and Medicaid for hardworking Americans who paid into these entitlement programs and deserve those hard-earned benefits. And unfortunately, the mainstream media has taken Mr. Musk out of context. I saw a Bloomberg headline that our team actually worked on getting updated and fixed because it was so wrong, and it took Mr. Musk out of context. What he was specifically referring to cutting was the waste and the fraud and abuse that does exist in these programs. According to an IG report from the Social Security Administration, there's more than $70 billion of fraud in the Social Security program alone that we know of. And so the president will continue to protect these programs for hardworking Americans, and actually cutting the waste, fraud, and abuse out of these programs will protect it for hardworking Americans.
But Caroline, respectfully, he said around $500 to $700 billion. There was no evidence to claim that. And also, if that is the case, that would represent more than a third of what Social Security paid out last year, maybe 20% of Social Security and Medicare.
Again,
combined.
if you read his full quote, he said, we think. So it's an estimate based on what he's seen. He's not saying definitively, he's saying that's what DOJ suspects and thinks. And that's exactly why DOJ was created, to ensure that we are investigating the fraudulent spending, the wasteful abuse across our federal government. And I would remind everybody in this room that 77% of the American people support this effort by Elon Musk and DOJ to identify such waste, fraud, and abuse.
White House Press Secretary Caroline Leavitt at today's White House news conference. Senator Cory Booker, Democrat from New Jersey, had this to say about Elon Musk's comment at a news conference on Capitol Hill.
So there's an old saying, and we all know it, if someone tells you who they are, believe them the first time. When it comes to Social Security, we're watching how Donald Trump, Elon Musk, and other Republicans are mocking the program, as the president did during his joint address. They're weakening the program by laying off thousands of workers, undermining the program's strength, and they're demeaning and degrading people who rely on Social Security, people who paid into it their entire lives, by using words like parasites. We see what they are doing to this program. We are seeing what they're doing to the retirement security of tens of millions of Americans. Our grandparents rely on Social Security. Our parents rely on Social Security. 73 million Americans rely on Social Security, and they have made it clear what they intend to do. They want to attack this program, attack the people that rely on it, weaken the program, and ultimately try to take away from the program in order to give bigger and bigger tax cuts to billionaires. This is outrageous. This is unacceptable. And we who believe in the program, who understand the strength and critical importance of Social Security, understand that this is an earned benefit, we are going to stand up to fight against Donald Trump, against Elon Musk and others who want to take Social Security down. The stand is clear. The president and Musk mock, weaken, and demean the recipients of Social Security, and we're going to stand up to defend it.
Senator Cory Booker, Democrat of New Jersey, at a news conference today on Capitol Hill with other Senate Democrats. President Trump writing on Truth Social, to Republicans, conservatives, and all great Americans, Elon Musk is putting it on the line in order to help our nation, and he is doing a fantastic job. But the radical left lunatics, as they often do, are trying to illegally and collusively boycott Tesla, one of the world's great automakers, and Elon's baby, in order to attack and do harm to Elon and everything he stands for. They tried to do it to me at the 2024 presidential ballot box, but how did that work out? In any event, I'm going to buy a brand new Tesla tomorrow morning as a show of confidence and support for Elon Musk, a truly great American. Why should he be punished for putting his tremendous skills to work in order to help make America great again? That was the post from President Donald Trump on Monday night, and President Trump did inspect some Teslas on the south portico of the White House with Elon Musk today.
Are you looking to buy or lease today?
Well, I'm going to buy, and I'm going to buy because, number one, it's a great product, as good as it gets,
and number two, because this man has devoted his energy and his life to doing this. And I think he's been treated very unfairly by a very small group of people. And I just want people to know that you can't be penalized for being a patriot. And he's a great patriot. And he's also done an incredible job with Tesla. And I mean, nobody else has a car company started up in the last 30 years that's been successful. I don't think so. And not only successful, but super successful. And because he's able to find billions and billions and billions of dollars of fraud and waste and all of the things. I mean, our country is going to be very strong very soon because of a lot of the things that he's done and a lot of the things that I'm doing. And there's no better team, but there's no better for what we're doing. There's nobody like this, and he shouldn't be penalized. And when I watched the other day, I said, I can't believe it. It should be the opposite. People should be going wild, and they love the product, but because he's finding all sorts of terrible things that have taken place against our country, they want to penalize him in an economic sense. And I just think that's very unfair. So I just wanted to make a statement. I'm going to buy one. Now, here's the bad news. I'm not allowed to drive because I haven't driven a car in a long time, and I love to drive cars. But I'm going to have it at the White House, and I'm going to let my staff use it. I'm going to let people at the place use it. And they all are all excited about that. I'm not allowed to use it. Can you believe it? One of my great things in life is that I can, I like to drive cars, but I'm not allowed to. And I will say, this one, the Cybertruck, I bought for a very special young woman. Do you know? I'm sure you've never heard of her, Kai. And she's a great golfer, and she puts the clubs in the back, and I guess it's a very safe deal. She loves it. And I actually bought one about a year ago, and she loves it. And it's very safe, it's very strong, heavy. It's all steel, stainless steel. But the cars themselves, so what is this one, Elon?
That's a Model Y.
That's a Model Y, so I have a lot of information to put into price.
Yeah.
I want to make a good deal here. I do notice this. They have one, which is $35,000, which is pretty low. What is that all about?
Yeah, it's, I guess we want to make the point that Teslas aren't all expensive. You can get a Tesla for as little as $35,000.
Yeah.
And I just want to thank the president for his support. This means a lot. And also thank everyone out there who is supporting Tesla. It's really terrible that there's so much violence being perpetrated against people at Tesla, Tesla supporters, Tesla owners, Tesla stores. These are innocent people who've done nothing wrong.
Elon Musk, the owner of Tesla and also the head of the Department of Government Efficiency, at the White House with President Donald Trump. President Trump, Associated Press reports, later selected a Model S, and it retails for about $80,000. He said he would write a check and leave it at the White House so his staff can drive it. This is Washington Today. From the Washington Post, the Trump administration will immediately lift its pause on military and intelligence support for Ukraine after Kyiv's endorsement of a U.S. ceasefire proposal, according to a joint statement by Ukraine and the United States. Statement says Ukraine expressed readiness to accept the U.S. proposal to enact an immediate interim 30-day ceasefire, which can be extended by mutual agreement of the parties and which is subject to acceptance and concurrent implementation by the Russian Federation. The United States will communicate to Russia that Russian reciprocity is the key to achieving peace. The Post article says it was not immediately clear whether Moscow would accept the proposal. The agreement followed a more than 8-hour meeting between senior U.S. and Ukrainian officials in Saudi Arabia. Secretary of State Marco Rubio and National Security Advisor Mike Waltz, two of those U.S. officials, spoke to the press in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia.
As has been clear from his first day as president, even as a candidate, President Trump is a president. He wants to be a president of peace. His goal in this entire process has been to bring about an end to this war. It's a terrible war, a costly war, a bloody war. And his number one interest is ending this war once and for all. Today, we made an offer that the Ukrainians have accepted, which is to enter into a ceasefire and into immediate negotiations to end this conflict in a way that's enduring and sustainable and accounts for their interests, their security, their ability to prosper as a nation. I want to personally we both want to thank the Kingdom of Saudi Arabia, His Majesty, for hosting us, for making this possible. They've been instrumental in this process, and we're very grateful to them for hosting us here today. And hopefully we'll take this offer now to the Russians. And we hope that they'll say yes, to peace. The ball is now in their court. And but again, the president's objective here is, number one, above everything else, he wants the war to end. And I think today Ukraine has taken a concrete step in that regard. We hope the Russians will reciprocate.
Well, just to add to the Secretary's comments, the Ukrainian delegation today made something very clear, that they share President Trump's vision for peace. They share his determination to end the fighting, to end the killing, to end the tragic kind of meat grinder of people and national treasure that's happening on the front in Ukraine. Number one. Number two, they made concrete steps and concrete proposals, not only accepting our proposal for a full ceasefire, which you can see the details of which are in our joint statement that we released together. But we also got into substantive details on how this war is going to permanently end. What type of guarantees they're going to have for their long-term security and prosperity, but also really looking at what it's going to take to finally end this, the horrific fighting. The other piece that I just want to make very clear is President Trump started this diplomatic effort in the Oval Office, talking to both leaders, both President Putin and President Zelensky back to back. And now that shuttle diplomacy continues. We have a named delegation in terms of next steps from the Russian side. We have a named delegation in terms of next steps from the Ukrainian side. I will talk to my Russian counterpart in the coming days. Secretary Rubio will be with G7 foreign ministers in the next couple of days. We have the NATO Secretary General in the White House on Thursday, and we'll take the process forward from there. So, as a result of that, and I think as a result of this positive step forward, the president has decided to lift the pause on aid and on our security assistance to Ukraine going forward. And that's effective immediately.
White House National Security Advisor Michael Waltz alongside Secretary of State Marco Rubio in Saudi Arabia. RT, the Russian government-funded news site, reports that U.S. President Donald Trump has announced that an American delegation will meet with their Russian counterparts today or tomorrow, Reuters reported on Tuesday. Statement follows the conclusion of negotiations between the American and Ukrainian delegations in Saudi Arabia, during which Kyiv agreed to a 30-day ceasefire and Washington committed to resuming intelligence sharing with Ukraine. Also speaking to the press ahead of the meeting, one of the people in the Ukrainian delegation, the head of presidential office, Andriy Yermak.
No more than Ukrainians want a peace, and Ukraine ready to go for this goal, because it's the most what really want Ukrainian people after more than 3 years of the full-scale invasion of Russia, and unfortunately about 11 years of the starting of aggressions against our country. And of course we're ready to do everything to achieve a peace.
Would you still be asking for a security guarantee from the Americans?
Yes, of course, security guarantees. It's very important because we want that never this aggression never repeated in the future again. Of course, it's very important, but now we think it's necessary to discuss the most important how to start this process. And we're very open, and we want to have very constructive, deep, friend partners conversation with our American partners.
Andriy Yermak is the head of the Ukrainian presidential office, speaking to reporters in Jeddah, Saudi Arabia, before today's meeting with the American officials, including Secretary of State Marco Rubio. Associated Press writes that the high-stakes talks between the senior delegations from Ukraine and the United States on how to end Kyiv's 3-year war with Moscow opened in Saudi Arabia on Tuesday, hours after Russian air defenses shot down 337 Ukrainian drones over Russia. 2 people were killed and 18 were injured, including 3 children, in the massive drone attack that spanned 10 Russian regions, officials said. No large-scale damage was reported. That was from Associated Press. From NBC4 in Washington, D.C., the National Transportation Safety Board is recommending permanent changes to helicopter operations near D.C.'s Ronald Reagan National Airport after discovering helicopters were regularly flying as close as 75 feet away from commercial planes. The NTSB gave the update Tuesday as it continues to investigate the January 29th collision between an American Airlines passenger jet and an Army helicopter. Both plunged into the Potomac River, killing all 67 people aboard. NTSB Chairwoman Jennifer Homendy said investigators found separation distances between helicopters on what's known as Route 4 and planes landing on DCA runway 33 were too close and posed an intolerable risk to aviation safety. That was reporting from NBC4. Here's part of the news conference with Chairwoman Homendy.
We've determined that the existing separation distances between helicopter traffic operating on Route 4 and aircraft landing on runway 33 are insufficient and pose an intolerable risk to aviation safety by increasing the chances of a mid-air collision at DCA. Let me repeat that. They pose an intolerable risk to aviation safety. We're therefore recommending today that the FAA permanently prohibit operations on helicopter Route 4 between Haines Point and the Wilson Bridge when runways 15 and 33 are being used for departures and arrivals at DCA. Now, we recognize that a total closure of helicopter 4 between Haines Point and the Wilson Bridge during times when runway 15 and runway 33 are in use would restrict a vital aviation corridor used for law enforcement activity, Coast Guard patrols, and continuity of government operations. Additionally, mandating that controllers hold helicopters in place north or south of DCA while airplanes are operating on runway 15 and runway 33 has the potential to increase risk by adding to controller workload. So we are also recommending that the FAA designate an alternative helicopter route that can be used to facilitate travel between Haines Point and the Wilson Bridge when that segment of Route 4 is closed.
NTSB Chair Jennifer Homendy at today's news conference. She also released the preliminary report on the mid-air collision in January between the helicopter and plane. She said the agency is still in the fact-finding part of the investigation. Later, Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy spoke at his own news conference.
At best, we're in a situation where we're threading a needle allowing helicopters to fly down the same airspace as landing aircraft. And why this information wasn't studied and known before January 29th is an important question. But based on that information and this crash, we are going to continue with our restrictions on Route 4 here. So about 36 hours after the crash, we restricted this airspace, and we're going to continue with those restrictions. That would be from Haines Point to the Wilson Bridge. Again, this is the area right off of runway 33 where the crash happened. We're going to have a notice to airmen with the specific guidelines on how they're going to fly this route. I talked to Secretary Pete Hegseth earlier today, talked about giving the military, the DOD, a route around this restricted airspace, which I think the military is going to be fine with. We will have exclusions for presidential air travel, vice presidential air travel. If there's a life-saving mission or law enforcement, we'll have exclusions for that, and we'll take the appropriate action at DCA to shut down air travel to make sure we don't have, again, helicopters and airplanes crossing paths. So this is going to continue into the future, again, making sure air travel at DCA is safe.
Want to also talk about another point that Chair Hominy brought up, that over the last 2.5 years, there have been 85 near misses or close calls. And that is close calls that are within 200 feet of vertical separation and 1,500 feet of lateral separation. Incredibly close for aircraft. 85 of them. I think the question is, when this data comes in, how did the FAA not know? How did they not study the data to say, hey, this is a hot spot, we're having near misses, and if we don't change our way, we're going to lose lives? That wasn't done. Maybe there was a focus on something other than safety. But in this administration, we are focusing on safety. And so what the FAA has deployed is AI tools to make sure we can sift through the data and find hotspots in our airspace at our airports. So if there's another DCA-esque situation out there, our AI tools will help us identify those and take corrective actions preemptively as opposed to retroactively. Also another incredibly important safety lesson that we've learned from the DC airspace crash.
Transportation Secretary Sean Duffy at a news conference today. And finally, on Washington Today from ABC News, 5 years ago, the World Health Organization declared the COVID-19 outbreak to be a pandemic, leading to stay-at-home orders and shutdowns across the U.S. and world. The nation looks much different since then, and scientists and researchers have learned a lot about the virus, including how it infects people, the best forms of treatment, and what puts someone at risk for long COVID. There are still many questions, however. Healthcare professionals are working to find answers, such as how many people have truly died, how long the virus spread undetected in the U.S., and its origins. That was from ABC News. This was the World Health Organization Secretary General, Dr. Tedros, on March 11th, 2020, 5 years ago.
WHO has been assessing this outbreak around the clock, and we're deeply concerned both by the alarming levels of spread and severity and by the alarming levels of inaction. We have therefore made the assessment that COVID-19 can be characterized as a pandemic.
WHO Secretary General Dr. Tedros 5 years ago today. The emergency declaration was lifted in 2023. Thanks for listening to Washington Today. Sign up for C-SPAN's evening newsletter word for word and get the stories making headlines in Washington emailed to you every day. Subscribe at cspan.org/connect. Have a good night.
C-SPAN's Washington Journal, our live forum involving you to discuss the latest issues in government, politics, and public policy from Washington and across the country. Coming up Wednesday morning, a look at the latest efforts by Congress to extend government funding past Friday's deadline with The Hill's Al Weaver. Then, California Republican Congressman Tom McClintock, a member of the Budget Committee, will share details on the legislation and President Trump's priorities. Also, Maryland Democratic Congresswoman Sarah Elfreth discusses this week's vote on the measure to fund the government through September 30th and her legislation to protect some federal workers from DOGE layoffs. C-SPAN's Washington Journal. Join in the conversation live at 7 Eastern Wednesday morning on C-SPAN, C-SPAN Now, or online at cspan.org.